And okay, yeah. So before I continue, just want the consent of everybody here uh, to record this webinar. Okay. And if any of you don't want it recorded, you might, say so in the chat box, or you can, turn off your camera. All right. Okay. So that audio alone gets recorded if you speak. Okay. Thank you. All right. Yeah. And this we are co-hosting on behalf of the South Asia Bioethics Council, which is comprised of people from across South Asia, and specifically, many of the people in the working committee or who are members are largely in bioethics or similar kind of research, biomedical research. But there are some of us who do other kinds of research too. And we host reading sessions, webinars, and other kind of discussions with a host of people from across South Asia. And also Roshni, who's the co-host and who's been helping me a lot in the background, who's also a researcher at one of the universities in India, Mangalore, is the co-host for today. She has posted a link in the chat box as to how you can join our mailing list. All right. Then now to introduce you all to the speakers, welcome again. And thanks especially to Alicia, who is a queer lawyer from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She has worked with queer rights NGOs, I mean, more as a volunteer. She's a corporate lawyer there. And it's almost a late evening for her, but thanks for that, staying on. Then we have Akramul, who has co-founded, who has founded Tehai, an organization which works largely on transgender people's rights in Bangladesh. Okay. Akramul likes to call herself Akramul Hijda. And Akramul's time zone is also about an hour ahead of India, hour or hour and a half, sorry, currently. So again, thanks to you for, even though it's later in the evening, to join. Then we have Duha, who's in Bangalore, India. Duha's pronouns are they and she. Duha is an intersex rights activist and the Intersex Asia Research Fellow for 2022-2023. Duha is also a molecular biologist, and Duha is the co-founder of Intersex Human Rights India Network, a network of intersex people and their supporters. I'm also one of the co-founders of that network, and I've also co-founded a couple of other organizations which work on various human rights issues for children, youth, and adults. Okay, so just to set the context, maybe a few of you who joined early were hearing the conversation which Alicia and I were having informally. We have found as queer folks, yeah, all our lives, none of us became queer suddenly. We believe we are born queer, but maybe we discover it later. And I'm saying some of these words or some of these things, and what may some of us in the conversation, in the next 1 hour might sound strange to you, might sound different or uncommon to you, but that is our reality. So we request respect, not just now, but if you aren't familiar with queer people but want to work with them or any of us, respect is where it all starts. Okay, so that is a request from us. All right. And also, the reason for this particular topic is that research, and this is not just about biomedical research, but research with and on queer people, especially by folks who consider themselves straight or not queer, it has largely been very unprofessional and unethical in terms of just, having wrong assumptions about us and not wanting to change them, and then having misconceptions. Like, just yesterday I was talking to a public health student, and then she just says, I presume all queer people have mental illness. I said, no, there's a difference between mental illness and mental health. And as a person who's studying public health, you should know that better than me. And we have people who come back, who just take our inputs and never come back to us with any acknowledgement, credit, or even as to what would have happened to that research. So these are the kind of experiences that we have found, and which is why many times queer folks, I'm not generalizing or talking for everybody, but I would be unsurprised if many others felt or observed this. And that often we feel that comes from just a pure lack of respect and the willingness to understand, yeah, why we feel that way. Is that, they take us for granted, and if we say we don't want to be involved in a research, or we don't want to give inputs, it goes off to, oh, you people are shy, arrogant, whatever. I mean, I think some of us have reached the point of not caring what people think. We are what we are, and you will have to realign yourselves to our realities if you want to work with us. I think that is what, hopefully people will take back from this discussion. Okay, so without much ado, over to you, Alicia. Right. And of course, Alicia being a lawyer, but it doesn't mean that only you, anybody else can talk about any policies or laws, if at all, in our respective countries, which are governing research specifically with queer folks. So, Alicia, in your experience, what has been like associating with any kind of research about or on queer people? Yeah, just want some
Right.
inputs from you. If you can turn on your camera, that'd be great, but otherwise it's okay.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ritash. And to answer your question, so I think Ritash mentioned earlier that I have volunteered with several queer rights organizations in Malaysia, and was previously more active in the community. Now, unfortunately, I'm a little bit dormant. But while I was participating in those organizations, I did assist with as well as participate in several research opportunities, largely for data collection and data monitoring purposes. So I think first, I'd like to compare that experience against my experience with research conducted by well, I'm assuming straight or non-queer people or otherwise not connected to the queer community. So with research from within the queer community, there's a big focus on security. And it is such a focus to the point where many of the tools that are usually used for research these days, especially online research such as Google Forms, um, are often scrutinized by the working community for whether it's secure enough for the purposes that we're using it for. And that is, of course, of particular priority of working with queer people because of how very real the danger is if that information is leaked or it gets into the wrong hands, especially for a lot of queer folks who may not be out in their private lives to their families or to their friends. This could have very real, long-lasting life impacts for them. So security is one of the utmost priorities in the queer community when conducting research. And often at the very start of the research form when getting consent, there is usually some kind of description of how the data is going to be stored, how it's handled, and so on. The other thing to consider is that in Malaysia, unfortunately, being queer is still criminalized. So that there is that other very real impact of someone's being in danger of of being in very real danger if their information is leaked. So those are a few considerations. As compared to my experiences with research outside of the community, a small disclaimer first is that I very seldom, if at all, participate in research conducted outside of the queer community, precisely for these security reasons. It is just not comforting, even when you are able to provide anonymized data, to know that your data is going into the hands of someone who might not prioritize your safety. So a lot of times I don't participate in research that's not conducted by the queer community. But when it comes to research outside of the queer community, I often find that there is no reassurance of the security of the data. There's no information on who is collecting the data, who is actually monitoring the data. A lot of times we're informed of the research, the person conducting the research, but not of their assistants or of their organization that they are conducting the research with. Like perhaps it's just Dr. so-and-so for their thesis, but not a mention of which university they're affiliated with, so on, or what purpose the research is for. And sorry, and another thing is that when anonymity is provided, oftentimes there's not enough information on how they will be storing the data and what platforms they'll be using to keep our information. And these are all big concerns, like I said before, for the community. Moving on into other aspects of research that I noticed there to be some disparity. For a lot of non-queer, for a lot of research that's conducted by organizations not within the queer community or not by the queer community, there seems to be a lack of sensitivity around handling certain topics. Is in fact some like incredibly invasive or unsettling questions may be found inside this kind of research. And there's also the element of I often find that a lot of this research targets groups that are in need of a lot of help and offer rewards in return for completing certain surveys or certain research and so on. And it feels like they are taking advantage of the needs of already marginalized community by offering these kind of rewards and services in exchange for their data. And it's not good. And the other thing is that particularly what I've noticed is that there are some institutions that collect data for harmful purposes on queer people, such as for conversion therapy or for like to pathologize us, to frame it as like a kind of disease or illness that we're facing that need to be cured. So questions will be asked like, how many of you suffer from X, or how many of you feel often feel in this ill manner, So that is also not great. Yeah. But these are from my own very personal experiences with research. In terms of, but even when it comes to research that's being done by the queer community, within the queer community, there is some space for improvement as well. I find that while within the queer community, of course, there's a bigger focus on what's the data being used for, how are we keeping it secure, and all of that. But a lot of times in those in the research surveys and questions that they give out, there are not enough options for people to choose. For example, how they might identify. There may not be like a fill in the blank option. in case none of the options apply to you, therefore making you choose like something that may not be applicable for yourself. And sometimes I find that research done within the queer community is not considerate of the vast spectrum of experiences that the queer community faces, because the queer community is not just like a couple of specific identities, it's millions and millions of people who are, you know, all experiencing life differently and with very different life experiences. And sometimes I find that the firms are not considerate enough of these kinds of experiences. For example, sometimes when asking for sexual orientation, there's often the assumption that you are not asexual and there's no option for you to pick asexuality, or there's no option for you to pick aromanticism, or no option for you to fill in the blanks at all. So then you are forced to kind of portray yourself as a person who does experience sexual attraction onto the form in that sense. So in this way. And at last, I think as a lawyer in Malaysia, I would also like to touch on some of the gaps in privacy law surrounding research. Specifically, this is specifically in Malaysia. So, I feel like it still might be useful to talk about. So in Malaysia, our privacy laws only apply to data collected for commercial purposes. And this is quite a big gap because it doesn't apply to data collected for research purposes. It only applies to data that's collected for or in connection with some kind of monetary gain, like when you fill in a shopping form, for example, when you sign up for someone on a website, but it will not apply to you collecting data for research. And so all of that protections for the privacy of data under Malaysian law don't apply for research purposes. Even assuming that it is extended to apply for research purposes, like I said, security concerns for queer folk around data is one of our biggest concerns, and the security policies under the existing privacy laws incredibly vague. It usually just says like security measures must be put in place, and there is no description of the kind of security measures that you have to put in. Also, under Malaysia's data privacy law, only notification is required to satisfy the consent requirement. You don't need to give explicit consent. Just that you have been notified of your rights is sufficient. And in this case, it may not be sufficient to protect RG, very marginalized community, and there's no additional requirements for handling data coming from marginalized community or for specific research purpose. And lastly, under existing privacy law, the sharing of personal data in order to prevent or to capture criminal activity is exempted, meaning that even if you are required to comply with the privacy laws, if you then use that data for to identify a criminal or to send it to the police for them to identify a criminal, it is not a breach of the privacy laws because the privacy laws explicitly accept that. And this is a huge problem when your very identity is criminalized. So that means even not considering all the problems I've already highlighted, the biggest gap of them all still exists right there. So I think that is there was one more thing I did want to add. So the thing is, under Malaysian privacy law, there is a difference between regular personal data and sensitive personal data. So sensitive personal data includes things like your medical health, your political views, and so on. And while it's arguable that your orientation or identity would fall under sensitive personal data, again, because being queer is a crime in Malaysia as of right now, unfortunately. Even though there is a separate category for this kind of data, it wouldn't apply ultimately, or ultimately the the provisions for handling this kind of sensitive data are not sufficient for handling our data. Maybe just to clarify, the special provisions relating to sensitive personal data are usually that explicit consent is required to collect it, meaning that I need you to sign a form in order to collect it, as opposed to just a notice requirement. And I also need your consent if something changes in the terms that I had you sign off on. So those are the protections for sensitive personal data.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Fantastic. I kept hearing consent, privacy, and of course, that's so much part of ethics. And yeah, we'll come back to further comment and discussions later. So over to you, Akramul. Just please again feel free to share. Yeah, similar to Alicia, any kind of research. Of course, though this is specific. I mean, this council or this group works a lot on biomedical research. I think ethics should be applicable to any kind of research, and as queer folks, we found that is an issue in so many places. So yeah, without again delaying further, Akramul, and if you can turn on your camera, if you don't mind, Akramul, that'd be great. Thank you.
I can try putting my camera on, but
Yay!
I'm not.
Wonderful.
I'm just getting ready to going for another research in Kustia. So
Okay.
my bus is at like 11 today. So it's fine. I'm Akramul. So I changed my last name actually to moment from moment to actually Hijra last year. So it's like big question in Bangladesh why I am using this title particularly that actually used by Hijra people in Bangladesh. Uh, uh, Mostly who actually lives under Hijra gurus and uh, I think these kinds of certain culture. But I'm not personally involved with this community, but I have been addressed by this name, I think, from very my early childhood. So the word belonged to me, I think, for a very long time, and I think most people actually would like to address me as Hijra because in Bangladesh, there is just one common identity that is, I think, commonly used for gender diverse people or queer people in Bangladesh. I think in Hijra. So I think in general, or like most people are not still, I think, familiar with different kinds of gender spectrums like LGBTQI plus communities. So mostly they know about male, female, and hijras. So in our last census, Bangladesh government also included the identity, and I chose Hijra in the last, I think, census. So I'm now officially registered as a Hijra, as a part of Hijra community. So, and I was also looking for a very, I think, religiously fluid, I think, queer name. And sometimes queer doesn't mean only, I think gender diverse, fluid gender fluidity or sexuality fluidity. I think religious fluidity also keeps a very important role in understanding our queerness, regardless gender. So in our, I think in Bangladesh, I find that most people are not actually take this word positively. They use this word as a slang actually. So, but we are trying to, I think, reconstruct the language and also the meaning and understanding of Hijra culture. So in a respectful way. So that's why I choose to change the nickname and use HIJRA. And HIJRA actually means I think a teacher, sometimes, or a guru actually. I mean, what in our Indian culture we found. So mostly teacher who actually teaches different kinds of disciplines. And I mostly work as a artist and researcher, and also journalist and curation. Mostly art and research based curation. Um, and I studied Bangla literature and lapsmith rituals, and I think social, sacred text. And now I'm trying to make a film on, I think, Behula Shoti. It's a title Behula Shoti based on Padma Puran. So I am trying to make a actually try to make a public engagement or public. Uh, I think getting access to I think mass people, or creating the conversation or cultural conversation or queerness, I think, in public places. So Tehai has been mostly trying to uh, make, I think, public exhibitions, because I think security is a very, I think, utmost priority in Bangladesh as well. And I think we queer people mostly organize closed door events. But I think after a certain point, I think that if we can't make public engagement, only closed door events are not sufficient to actually include all the gender spectrum who are locally coexisting, and also I think accepted, I think, as a gender fluid communities. Maybe they are not, I think, known as LGBTQI plus community, but there are many people who are heterosexual people who actually identify themselves as women because they play female characters in traditional theaters for a long time, like for 30 years or 40 years. And my research focuses on, I think, vernacular gender identities like Koti, and also transsex workers, hijras, and also urban queer people. And I think, and a larger part from chupris, who actually male actors but play female characters, and Behular Nachari, and also Alkap Gan, Madarer Gan, and another form is like known as Hastor Gan in Bangladesh. These are all traditional theater performances in Bangladesh, and I'm engaging all the, I think, people from these, I think, marginalized communities and gender diverse communities to our work. And I think the biggest challenge in these communities, I think, a lack of acceptance and also justice, because I think overall condition in Bangladesh, I think, is very sometimes very violent, and you don't have any room for seeking justice for anything. So you are a queer people, so as like being a gender non-binary person is still criminalized in Bangladesh. So I think, and also but I don't think we can make any progress in movement or like policy changing movement, or like 377 section. I'm not sure, no, I don't think that like 377 section is a big challenge in Bangladesh, because no files almost are actually filed under this section. But I think there are too many like new laws, like digital security laws, and also I think drug laws, and also I think any kinds of like arms and like arson attacks, and any political I think opposition parties faces these kinds of cases, I think, frequently. And I think queer community are not I think exempt, or like are not disconnected, or are not not part of these kinds of politics, because they are like খুব real risks, like in dating apps, like blackmailing or like hijacking. So these kinds of things are also happening. Media, local media reported these kinds of incidents. And I think in terms of these communities, like the Chukris or Koti communities or trans sex worker communities, I would like to say they are also, I think, seeking for I think legal rights, but I think the another wave of like trans queer feminist feminism movement in Bangladesh, I think are not like concerned about these kinds of policy changes or actually realistic changes. I'm not saying like there is no changes in Bangladesh. Definitely some transgender people or other people are taking part in politics and or also like getting priorities in media, but they are also following a very I think standard very I think socially fixed I think beauty standard, or like some status I think making efforts that actually I think is like big challenge for many people from marginalized communities to get access actually or to get opportunities. And the funds or the like economical definitely we're trying to make conversation, but we need money to keep the conversation actually moving. So we are also like seeking for like holistic I think holistic support to actually advance the movement, but still now it's very difficult for us because we have issues is like making a like stable team or like work in a public sector, like it needs like big arrangement, and sometimes we artists are not ready to compromise anymore. So I would like to like focus on that, because the money or like the funds or the other efforts what I see around like queer issues is I think there are too many things are happening, but what we are getting from these kinds of activities or these kinds of things, definitely we have progress in like digital security trainings or these kinds of activities, but we're still not still not fit for to launch a digital public queer movement. So when it's come to like public, then people put a like very big question. I think like bringing the security issue, I think before us. So but we are arranging, but we have like records of like convening public queer events, I think from over the last 3 years, and we would like to take over the digital spaces as well. So I think we definitely should lead our research in a sensitive way to actually include all the details, but also I would like to focus on positive use of technology. And I think how we can actually make like a public engagement through art. So I think making a public engagement is a bigger challenge for us and for all of us, because all the queer activists we seek for like a holistic movement or a I think not like when we are thinking to like hold street protest or like any kinds of things, but I think keeping the conversation open, and also making like creative progress, and also changing our ways to use all the stuff, I think, or resources is our like I think my most focus in this movement. But I think we should to keep like conversation open, and also non-judgmental, I think, acceptance of queer people, because I think I found like other people who actually work for so-called queer people, or like I think gender minorities, these places sometimes are very violent, and sometimes I think and also like other I think personal experiences in Bangladesh, like dealing with I think family members or I think loved ones, I think is very critical. And if you can't put your focus on your work, I think after fighting all the I think kinds of I think violent things, and also you will have to be your own kind of I think mental peace source. So it's like creating our own I think peace system. And I think exclusion from a so-called queer and feminist movement is also sometimes is like big things, because I think uh feminist movements, feminist activists, and also like queer activists in Bangladesh, I think they are not united at all. And sometimes I think their structures are very problematic for people, for people like us, because we are not actually used to I think work with we artists actually, and also I think any sensitive people are not we don't believe only in like paperworks, or only I think in a like structural programs. So and these programs I think should need a huge change, and they are also not, I think, like Malaysia, are not sensible enough about I think gender diverse people, and they are also I think taking advantage of this structural thing, and in a very I think in democratic way. So I think uh, talking about this discomfort ethics are also important, and sometimes sincere sharing uh, is difficult, but I think we should make it possible. Otherwise, I think we can't keep our voice, I think, keep counted, or like to save our voices, because there are a lot of conspiracies against us, and being a queer people is a very vulnerable issue in Bangladesh right now. And I think other South Asian country or like India, they can make a forecast, or they can like predict I think certain kinds of things about freedom, about legal rights, but we I think are far behind than our neighboring countries. And taking this movement and this conversation, I think in a like impactful position, or move it to a I think equitable position is a very difficult job I think in Bangladesh, uh, because I think political condition in Bangladesh are also is not like stable, and also like it's also very undemocratic in our country. So this actually from me for today, but I can clarify more if you can, if you guys would like to know more about our work on, I think, communities like Chukri, or I think Al Kapgan, Madarigan. So I'm open to, I think, all the questions. So over to you, Ritash.
Okay, thank you so much. Um, actually, it's wonderful, Akramul, that you also talked about things which, you know, are so pertinent to this. Maybe you didn't say specifically this thing about research, but then when you do not have acceptance and sensitivity, yeah, partly also as what Alicia, so crucially reiterated, where is the scope for research, where is the scope for documentation, understanding, right? And of course we all know about the funding politics. So these are fundamental to any kind of interaction and thereby research happening. So I think you touched upon some very, sensitive and very unheard issues, right? Deliberately, these things are not talked about, right? And so anyway, we'll return to you soon. And Duha, so straight to the topic. Please feel free to share your thoughts. Thank you, and your experiences, of course.
Thank you, Ritash. Thank you, Akramul and Alicia. I really, it was a learning curve for me to hear your narratives and thoughts. While you obviously took a lot of topics that I wanted to cover, so I'm not going to specifically touch on much more on queer research as much as I want to cover on intersex research, because I feel like not the fact that this, we are invisibilized from research itself, but queer research it's even worse. So what I did was, before coming to this session, I spoke to a researcher. I'm a researcher myself right now, vaccine research. I try to understand what are the social behavior and economic drivers that lead to somebody to get vaccinated, to not get vaccinated, and if what are the barriers that pertain to this context. So I asked a good friend of mine who is an intersex researcher, and I wanted to know his point of view about things, and I wanted to know that, what are we really lacking when we say querying research, but in a intersex context? So it's a good question to ask yourself. Can you tell me, if I ask the audience right now present, what do you think is lacking with researchers when we talk about intersex research? To put this into perspective, it is, some of the issues that, we are trying to address here is that sometimes we use a lot of medically unnecessary, non-consensual, words or the phrasing of our languages, or we use these words called interventions, that are fundamentally violating human rights. But we use them in our research because we do not know the history behind it. We do not know the the context of history behind it, or the oppression or the pain or suffering that has it given to the intersex community or people. And it is, I think, our responsibility to also educate ourselves on the language, and to know that language is constantly evolving. And it's okay that we have made mistakes in past. It's time to correct ourselves and rectify our language, and rectify the way we conduct research. There is a lot of lack of awareness and understanding about different intersex variations in general public to begin with. Yes, so like not just researchers, but general public itself is not very understanding or accommodating about intersex understanding, and so goes for the queer community as well. I'm not saying that it's the fault is just on general, cis and heterosexual population. It's also the queer population not understanding what intersex variations are and why it is so vital and important to talk about these variations. There is a lot of disparity that we observe in physical, mental, health discussions when it comes to intersex health, intersex research. There are a lot of barriers to this research as well, very limited scope of understanding. And when I say limited scope of understanding, there's a good question that we should be asking why. And the answer is that the books that we have, the syllabus, the curriculum development, etc., that we have is not intersex accommodating. The legal books that you pick up, the medical books that you pick up, describe intersex people. In medical terminology, there's a word called chromosomal aberrations. That is how you describe intersex people. You call them a deviant, a disorder, or by definition, you say that not, you're not normal. But my question to you is, what is normal then? How do we define the scale of normality? Or what is normal to you might not be normal to the world out there. So it is important that we question our biases right now and today itself, so it leads to a better, eye-opening conversation. The another barrier of intersex research is quite overlooked is that what are the specific needs and experiences of people with these intersex variations. There are more than 46 plus intersex variations out there. Some of them still not widely understood because of lack of evaluation methods or diagnostic tools to really understand how these intersex variations work within our body, or just evolving constantly. And when what happens is that after a while we become complicit with this unique system of something called as heteropatriarchy that we have on this, and this normativity is that we become so accustomed to this routine of not caring anymore. So when our research becomes of not, delving deep into the context of why are we not able to do more, anything more about this, then we, are, complicit within the system of, just going with the routine, going with the flow of it, really not bothered about why specific. So it's important that we touch on and why it is not there. Now we do understand, as a researcher, I do understand that trying to work around certain issues, trying to improve the quality and the quantity of research that we do. And we also have to ensure that the people who are involved in their, research processes, very specifically for intersex research, as a researcher, I would say that the people who are involved in this research process, their rights, needs, and privacy has to be respected no matter what. I do understand there are sometimes questions, curiosities, or even certain definitions that might need a lot of clarity, but that does not mean that you can be intrusive or you can violate their rights and needs. That it is fundamental that we put these ahead of our curiosities. Something important to ask here is, what are some of the things that researchers might be overlooking to whatever I just spoke about? And if you thought that, you're right to think about it, because there are a lot of things that researchers might still miss out when it comes to intersex research. And to quote or to begin with is that first, there is lack of representation of intersex people in the research team itself. So there are organizations here in India that are, recruiting intersex consultants. My organization, Sangat, for example, have done that. So when they were working on an intersex related, project, they made sure that they hire or have someone who's intersex on their team who can, help them out with the trust building process, because all of this is really a lot about trust building process. And it's important that we, not just respect the rights of people and the needs, but we also build this trust system that has a closed loop mechanism of, giving back a feedback. And so that on the basis of this feedback, you can work alongside with people. So another barrier to, why we are not able to achieve what we are going ahead with is the failure to, and I've already mentioned, the failure to take in account the diverse intersex experiences and identities people have, and to very importantly remember that intersex is a biological identity. It is not nothing to do with your gender identity or sexual orientation, very different from both of those things. So biological identity is evolving, it's evolution. Biology is evolving constantly. It's not going to stay stagnant. 50 years from now, a lot of changes will come in biology. And as I speak right now, all of this, we are evolving. Our body, as you breathe in, wherever you're sitting in, you're breathing in air. So the air that you're breathing in has a lot of microbes. So you know what your body is doing right now? It's really fighting those microbes. As you're inhaling, you're not feeling that perhaps, but it's constantly fighting those microbes. So that is a state of evolution as well. We are not keeping those in our accountability as well. We're not thinking about that. So our bodies are sometimes able to do such a good job of not making us fall sick. Another barrier that I look at when we look at intersex research is that there is a lack of recognition of the historical and cultural context in which intersex people live. So intersex people come from different countries, racial viewpoints, financial background, social and cultural identities. They're not just confined. They're not just like a social cultural identity confined to South Asia or Southeast Asia, or specific to one religious ethnic centric group. No, there have been intersex people across the world as well. So it is, to deny intersex people their status and say that no, you belong to one historical marginalized group is wrong. It is intersex phobia. It is, we should not be doing this. And our reliance on an outdated and pathologizing language and concepts is another biggest barrier that we face as researchers, and we are not doing enough to work around it. For example, just if you just Google Klinefelter's syndrome will come up. This first word, algorithms will tell you what's gonna come next. But when you put the word variation, that might not show up. It will still show up as syndrome itself. Why is that happening, and what can we do about that? Maybe we're not able to do much more on a uh, internet point of view of things, but maybe we can start structuring our language in a little better way. Instead of saying syndrome, let's not pathologize the variation itself. Let's start calling it diversity. Maybe we can say client-centered diversity. It might not take us some time to get used to the word itself, but that's okay. Language is evolving. We are evolving, as I just told you. So it's okay for us to, use new terminologies and get familiarized with it. Or at least, try not using words or thoughts or, uh, uh, concepts in such a way that it brings pain to other people. Because we know that largely in a lot of historical contexts, there are some terminologies that are considered offensive. So I can tell you that as an intersex person, that for me, certain words are offensive. And I want you to take heed of this. I want you to learn out of this. It's that important that we become accommodating of these words as well. When we come specifically talk about medical research with intersex research as a priority, we see that there is, certain very specific barriers that are very prevalent to the intersex community. One is very limited funding. Now, this is very important when it comes to research, is that you have to have funds. Yes, your research needs to have that kind of funding to take your research forward. So there is unfortunately very limited funding given for intersex research, which means that there are very few researchers working in this area. That is what is happening. So fewer researchers equal to fewer people working in this particular area, right? And then there is this lack of standardized criteria of evaluation or any sort of system that tells, or classifies intersex variations into variations. There are just these nuanced understandings of intersex variations being disorders, and which makes it very difficult for researchers as myself to compare whatever data that I have got as results across studies that I will make in future as well. So as an intersex person, I'm facing these issues. Imagine somebody who's not intersex, somebody who's endosex. So that's the word that we use for someone who's not intersex. Might have to face through, different papers and, qualitative, quantitative resources that they find across, which, by the way, is also very rare out there. And again, as I mentioned, that certain times what happens because of lack of lack of appropriate information that is out there, you might you as a medical researcher might overdiagnose or misdiagnose an intersex variation. When I say diagnosis, it really does not, for me, does not come from a pathologizing sense of wording. It comes from a very reclaimed sense of this thing. But let's not overtly believe that everybody is comfortable with the word diagnosis. Maybe evaluation can also work it. So let's switch our terminologies as well as we are speaking. Let's be more empathetic in our language. And why I say this is very important. We all are deserving of basic or fundamental care needs and this thing. Everybody of us is deserving of that, and we all wanted to be treated with dignity, with respect. So vice and versa. So let's treat the people or somebody you're researching with the same aspect like how you want to be treated with. Uh, Another barrier that commonly manifests is that you have a lot of difficulties in recruiting who's intersex and who's not. There is this common fear that I'm not finding somebody who's intersex. Can a trans person step into this place and be my participant? Perhaps yes, there are some trans folks who identify themselves as who are sorry, some trans folks who are intersex as well. We do not know that, right? So, difficulties in recruiting intersex people for research studies because of the sensitive, sometimes very personal nature of intersex variation. Sometimes it's very triggering for intersex people to talk about these variations. A lot of dilemma, a lot of personal stigma, discrimination, and violence that they would have faced. Now, something that I love talking about and is how do you become better allies? So first is something with a method that I believe is called LARS, learn, attend, research, and search. So you're learning right now. You're learning something, picked up something new today. You learned about intersex region. Attending, you're already doing that. So congratulate yourselves for that. And research, when you're researching, try looking at alternative sources. Searching is a difficult job. Researching is you have the internet. Searching is your personal own journey. So you have to really go on to the depths of the beyond part of it and search for narrative, search for documentation, search for stories, and that reflect on the same. So the ideal way of really going about this is that you collaborate with intersex organizations and you start to advocate using whatever meaningful platforms that you are or have access to ensure that the research that is being done on intersex people is informed by their lived experiences and the perspectives of intersex people. Now you have to remember that when you are working on this, please use inclusive and affirming language in concepts of research and avoid using any terms that are pathologizing or stigmatizing language. As I said, language is an evolving, beautiful thing. So let's start using, language as an evolving concept. Let's start promoting diversity and inclusion within our teams. Research teams need that. So let's start recruiting intersex researchers and people from diverse backgrounds that we are lacking on the fact that there is no inclusion within our teams. Let's advocate for better or greater investment in intersex research. Let's go to our funders and let's ask for them these offer these opportunities. That's from a legal point of view, you can go ahead for advocating for policies and practices that support for intersex people. All right. So there is a few more a few more things that I think, a few more examples that I think that can further work on this. Very specifically, when we think about, there are some issues very specific to the intersex community, intersex community when it comes to queer research. Now, queer intersex research is often overlooked. One point, it stands as number one pointer, or it is often even excluded from queer research, despite the fact that many intersex people do identify themselves as queer. Now, there are some reasons for this. A historical reason largely remains of how binary we want the system to be. The more binary it is, LGBTQ plus, LGBT, that's all. Sometimes not even plus is not considered. QIA though is a very forgetful fact. We don't even consider all of that. Even though we talk about Q as such, we don't sometimes even mention Q in our topics. So, what specifically are we lacking in queer research for intersex people? There is this conflict or conflation of intersex and transgender labels, which leads to the assumption that all intersex people are covered by transgender research, or sorry, all intersex people are transgenders, and vice versa. So that's not true. It's really on the individual. And the fact that in an Indian context, particularly with the Nalsa judgment of 2014 and the Draconian 2019 Act, Trans Act, I call it what it is, covers intersex people under the trans umbrella, which is what we are not. So it is important to highlight that. So a very, a focus on gender and sexuality in queer research, which excludes a lot of experiences of intersex people who might not identify themselves as sexual people. They might be asexual and intersex, a very valid identity. So all of that is, commonly brushed off as a thing that does not exist. Our queer researchers and queer movements love using the word love is love. Well, it's not. So, and there is a lack of recognition of unique health and social issues faced by intersex people, and the discrimination, the violence, and the a lack of access to appropriate health care, and very intersex specific, issues that, really affect the way they access these early medical interventions. This is very important to mention. So, someone who's intersex, who has very specific health needs, will not want to access a transgender health card or transgender card because they're not transgenders to begin with, right? If that person is not transgender, I don't think they should be forced by someone to take up an identity which they are not. And further, to understand, as I already mentioned this, is that what impacts on the negative health aspects of somebody who's intersex is not understanding that the historical context of how intersex people have existed has always been pathologized and stigmatized by the medical community. As we speak, perhaps a lot of intersex genital mutilations are being performed across the world, but are we caring enough to be angry about it? Well, the question lies in our solidarity within itself. So a lot of times intersex people are subjugated to unnecessary and non-consensual medical interventions, looking at surgeries, looking at hormone treatments, and this does not have to be at birth, childhood, at puberty. It can also be at a later adult stage, which can have lasting negative effects on their physical and mental health. And we often face discrimination, lack of understanding from society, which can lead to social isolation and poor mental health outcomes, which is very important in our, how do I say, corporates or corporate, not corporate spaces. And we do definitely do need more research to understand what are, the different outcomes, but this is something to begin with. Uh, just let me just, yes. So some mistakes that we might make as researchers, I just want to highlight that and conclude my talk here, is that one is to begin thinking that, when we research about intersex people, we usually think it of it in a very academic way. You start treating people as subjects. Let's not do that. Let's know that, people also have lives, they also do things, they also have capacities, and they also feel burnouts. So forcing somebody and, putting the pressure of the researcher pressure on them that I need this today, let's not do that. That's not good. Imagine someone doing that to you. Just put yourself in that shoe. Maybe you'll not experience the same pain, but you might similarly face the similar stresses. So to assume that all intersex people are an entire homogeneous group is incorrect. When in reality, we know that intersex people have diverse identities and experiences. And I've already mentioned that a lot of people come from different backgrounds. So it's important to understand that different people have different experiences and identities. What happens is that, when you focus only on the medical aspects of somebody's intersex variation, you are sometimes missing out on the social, larger aspects such as social, cultural, and physiological implications of how that impacts them. So, in our layman terminology, when we speak too much specific for South Asia, we overlook sometimes their caste and class. How does that impact them in their research? Sometimes even religion is underlined or not given enough consideration of how that might impact their comfort or privacy or their needs. Something that I would like to conclude with saying this is that we have existed before, we are existing today, we will continue to exist tomorrow. It's really up to all of us how to take this conversation forward. So thank you, Ritash. I'll take up any questions as they come up.
Okay, fantabulous. I am so glad that we are having these conversations and this webinar. And, again, the main points that I heard, I mean, I think I'm trivializing, oversimplifying all the enriching and so inspiring and touching thoughts and inputs from y'all. But it's fantastic. It's so important, which all of you said. Duha, you talked about abnormalization and pathologization, you kept reiterating it. And of course, specifically about intersex, and then a little bit you said about asexuality, which I think a bit even Alicia said. And as a gender fluid asexual person, pathologization is not very different for us to, oh, you're lacking some what do you call it, something which is normal, the hunger for yeah, it's for sex. Maybe I said, well, I have hunger for food but not so much for sex, or never. And similarly, that there is no hormonal deficiency, even if it is maybe something different. So I so openly and happily talk about this. All this came after lots of years of self-shaming and literally self-isolation. So, and this is so important, which all of you have reiterated, that presuming consent, presuming that we want to be researched. Yeah, but at the same time, making it in a way exclusionary, like, oh, you are the subject, you should cooperate. I'm saying this because I've had feedback from people saying I'm non-cooperative, from people who are not queer, don't understand even what is the reality of being queer, forget about asexuality, and saying that, do you regret being that? I mean, I was like, I just use dark humor. Yeah, I regret talking to you. I regret even engaging with you. That is what it is. And I always have said, like Akramul kept saying, LGBTQIA+, and then Alicia and Duha said, Yeah, sometimes the so-called lesser known identities are often left unknown or misinterpreted, right? So all this keeps happening, and we are not a whiny, wimpy group. Yeah, see, just look at how colorful we are. So I think that it's so important that we continue engaging respectfully. Yeah, I've been saying respect, respect, respect. But more importantly, just for thanks also for staying with us. It's extending by a little bit, but there was such crucial and such important uh, inputs, and not just inputs but thoughts and emotions shared today, that I just did not want to. I'm supposed to be a good timekeeper, but I decided, let it go on. And so if any of you have any questions, thoughts, um, concerns, yeah, please feel free to share them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves. We will wait for a few, seconds or minutes. Yeah. But otherwise, also, like everybody in the group has said, uh, you are always welcome to reconnect with us, yeah, on Instagram, on Twitter, yeah, through the South Asia Bioethics Council, or each of us, Rang, which I co-founded, and also Intersex Human Rights India, Tehai, and Alicia. Everybody is there on Insta, and of course other social media channels. So feel free to connect with us. But yeah, I'll just be silent for a few seconds. Anybody wants to say or ask anything? Yeah, I mean, and thanks specifically to Priya, who's been giving such encouraging and such, insightful comments. Yeah. So anybody? Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to say it even in the next few seconds or minutes that we're on. But just returning to all the people who spoke, Alicia, Akramul, and Duha, maybe you can raise your hands if you specifically have something to say, or otherwise I'll go one by one. Um, I'm going to ask Alicia again. Alicia, you talked so importantly about the laws and, about data protection and, yeah, privacy, consent. But is there any specific instance? I mean, I know you also said some of that, but any more specific instances or any remedies? We know it's not easy at all in so many of our countries, yeah, like the marriage equality verdict that you all would have heard about, which came through about 48 hours ago in India, right? And then it's so important. I mean, I remember like the way Akramul was saying, so much is common between Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lankan, and yeah, to some extent Myanmar, but not so much perhaps. But anything, Alicia, that you want to add or ask or suggest?
Yeah, sure. I guess maybe I would like to talk a little bit more about the queer research that I have participated in or seen other people conduct. Just to highlight some of the good practices, because I do realize that earlier in the talk, I guess I may have been like very pessimistic because I was focusing on gaps and so on. So in Malaysia, of course, we're a multicultural country with native Chinese, Malay, Indian population. So of course, all our research that we conduct in the queer community, we make it a point for it to be in as many languages as possible, so that everyone can really understand the purpose and the other parameters of the research being done. So that's great. The in the research that I've seen conducted, a lot of times it's very specifically stated the exact purpose that is being conducted for. So a lot of times these are relating to ongoing human rights work that are being done by these communities, data collection largely for reports and the like. And so this will be specifically stated and the kinds of reports that they're going into, and those reports will be shared in the same groups which the survey was shared to by the organizer. Of course, if the research is then shared on by other people, then maybe they won't specifically receive the reports. But in any case, the terms of the, I don't know what you call it, like the blurb of the research will give you information on where you can access the final report once it's available. They do highlight all of the people involved in the research, namely the main the investigators or the main researchers involved, as well as key team members, and also the organizations that are involved, so you know exactly who has your data. They will also share on they will also share on like if the data is anonymous or not, and if there's any and most of the time if rewards are offered for the research, which are depends on whether there's funding or not. If rewards are offered for the research, then it's optional and not automatically given. So those are all very good considerations, I feel. Also in these communities I was actively involved in, I did make some suggestions for the forms to be updated, or language used to be on language. So I think crucially that Duha raised how important language can be in conducting this research, not just to for the participants, but also for the researchers, to make sure that you're actually getting the data from the target demographic that you are trying to reach out to, and to ensure that your data is and your research is valid and useful. And I think one of the best ways to do that, other than of course looking at alternative sources like Duha mentioned and doing your own research, is to reach out to the communities that you are going to research and have that conversation with them. How can I best meet their needs? And especially if you can maybe approach community members who are willing to work with you or are friendly towards you, then you may be able to ask even some more sensitive questions and receive helpful feedback and constructive feedback that you can then use when you conduct your research proper. So I think this is very true in a lot of the queer communities I've participated in when they do research, and having reached out to me before they received my feedback in terms of my own views on asexuality, aromanticism, and gender identity, and then updated the forms accordingly to cater for that. And also a lot of the forms in Malaysia that are targeted towards the queer community by the queer community will include other kinds of names for identities that are used locally, like Akramul mentioned, but may not be known internationally, right? And I think that's also very, very useful. Like for example, in Malaysia, the transgender community specifically uses maknya, and that is not a slur; it's a term that they use for themselves. And by including that into forums and so on, it might be really helpful to members of those communities that may not otherwise encounter your research. So, or not know that they are included in the research category. So I think that's all the extras I have to say, and passing my time on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. Again, such crucial insights in such a short, sweet manner. Like, yes, we've been, and then this is something which we all talk all the time, right? Whenever amongst ourselves, we queer folks, and even with folks outside, when we call for sensitization, sharing, and all that, right? Participation, inclusion. Yeah, I remember, I think sex workers were the ones who first said this: nothing about us without us, right? Yes. Researchers with us, right? This is so much about participatory research, right? For instance, the Indian government, maybe other governments too, they have very selective, very what do you call, some kind of cursory participation, right? Nowadays, or the last few years, oh, this act is coming out, this policy, so there's a consultation and they'll put it out on the internet, which is almost inaccessible to more than half the Indian population. And then they will put it in English, which again, majority of the Indian population doesn't know or doesn't bother to learn and doesn't need to learn, right? And then the deadline will be approaching, and so that's not the kind of participation, right? So, and then again, same thing. I mean, because I've also been in media, like Akramul has, um, you know, help us write our narratives, break the language and the digital barrier, right? Have subtitles so that people with disabilities can see it. Don't make it always about textual and then put it in journals, which only very few people will read or refer, right? So some of these points, the participation and inclusion should come from and at the ground level, like as if, there's no difference between the ground and the sky. This is not utopian, but I think if you want to be mean grassroots, then you have to be grassroots, right? And Akramul, just quickly to you, you very nicely, but very bravely said about how funding and then sensitivity are so important. And both of that is very minimal about the queer community. Yeah, so you want to just do any final thoughts, or not final, but final for now, any instances or incidents that you want to share specifically, or any suggestions about any of this or anything else when it comes to research or so-called studying queer folks. Yeah. Anything you want to quickly say, Akramul? You're welcome.
Yeah, Ritash. I think that you actually brought out a lot of, I think, grounding things that I think very similar for I think to our research or like work as well. And I think in terms of funding, maybe it will be, I think it's still very difficult for, I think, marginalized queer groups to actually engage with these kinds of things. But we can actually approach, and I think the activists actually should break their comfort zone. And also I think there is a very big thing, gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is another thing, and I think these are all similar people who are actually taking all the things. But yeah, if they can make a, like, I think, holistic thing, or a like or I think impactful activities, or I think movement, that won't be like a won't be a problem. But these are the same faces, and the same kinds of conversations are going on, and I think mostly excluding, I think, these kinds of diverse groups. But inclusion, and I think all the other words are still very, I think, participation are very tokenistic in practically in Bangladesh. So I think we should go beyond this and allow people, I think, enough time to think, to work, uh, because I think there is a lot of it's like pressures of deadlines, or sometimes I think implementation of work, reporting, these kinds of things. But I think we need our deep, I think, concentration on our work, on our research, because it needs a lot of sensible things, because we can't represent a I think marginalized community with misconceptions and misconceptions about rituals, about their identity, about their other background, and it needs a lot of study, a lot of hard work and teamwork. And we need to maintain a very, I think, sometimes very strict, I think, deadlines that actually, I think, affect our work. And I don't want to actually keep this negative impact on my work, but I think it's matter of, I think, dealing with a lot of unnecessary things, many things, and still right now, but maybe we can like choose a better way to actually deal with the issues with like different, I think, donors. But I think the donors or the like partners, they should believe in like holistic, I think, approach. Otherwise the conversation is not possible to move to let it like move on. So but I think we are trying, but very few people in Bangladesh actually believe in this structure. Most of them actually believe in like so-called structural ways that doesn't work for me actually. So this is for me, and I think Tehai and I are, I think, on Instagram and other social media channels. Would be very grateful if you guys actually check our work. And also I would like to Duha and also I think Alicia for sharing all the, I think, very practical insights. And these are all like very similar things, but I am really, I think, inspired by the words. And especially thanks for Duha, because Duha pointed a lot of things that is very similar in Bangladesh, because I think intersex researchers are very few in Bangladesh, and who are working, they have not are like able to actually conduct a critical, I think, research. And they should, I think, make engagement, and they also should like break their rooms and also allow rooms for, I think, different kinds of, I think, intersex people. So best wishes for all the people. We all are hoping for a very, I think, bright and better future.
Thank you so much. That was lovely, Akramul. I mean, and yeah, I'm so glad that, we all took away things and built on what each other was saying about, yeah, I mean, structures are there, deadlines are there, but we can't be too stringent about that. I think Duha said that, and I was also coming that way because I'm a lot about, if not completely dismantling and structures, I'm about disruption in a healthy way, in an affirmative way, because many times the regular, normal, mainstream structures or norms do not work for us. Yeah, Alicia, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, parting thoughts, anything from you, Duha? That'd be wonderful to hear.
Just that. Thank you so much, Ritash and Roshni, for like co-hosting and coordinating this and SABC too for the platform. I quickly have another meeting, so I'll be leaving. But I have no thoughts to share. And so lovely hearing from Alicia and Akramul. Such lovely thoughts to share. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everybody again. You can connect with us in so many ways. And again, Akramul and Alicia and Duha, I'm so grateful to you and so glad that we are connected and friends and also fellow travelers. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, and if any of you wants to connect with each other, I'll be happy to do that. Okay. Thank you all. Ciao. Shukriya. Dhanyavad. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ritash. Take care.
Bye. You too.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Good
Love you
night.
all.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Bye. Bye. Thank you
Bye.
so much. It was wonderful bringing all this to you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.